Alcatraz was never, is not, and can never be mere concrete walls and cold water, it's always been more. An enigma wrapped in wire, shrouded in fog, and weighed down with mythology. For centuries, the world has gazed at that rocky outcropping in San Francisco Bay, asking the same eerie question, did anyone ever really escape alive? And now, in 2025, the story takes a fresh turn, one so detailed, so disturbing, that it destroys decades of presumption. But this is not a story with neat resolutions. It is not one of good guys or bad guys. It is one of silence, shadows, and an evening still echoing with secrets. What actually occurred behind those shut windows? And how close are we, even today, to ever really knowing? Situated 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, more popularly known simply as The Rock, was America's most notorious hub of incarceration at one point in its history. Prior to becoming a prison, the island was used as a military fortress in the 1850s. It was converted into a federal penitentiary by the Bureau of Prisons in 1934, where the most violent, rowdy, or cunning men deemed too hazardous for any other institution were sent. From the beginning, Alcatraz wasn't only a prison. It was supposed to be the last stop. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The facility was designed like a machine of control and order. The central cell house, built from 1910 to 1912, had 4 cell blocks, a mess, a library, a hospital, and administrative offices. The cells themselves were small, bare, with tool-proof steel bars. Inmates were counted up to 13 times a day, and the guard-to-prisoner ratio was the highest in the country. Rifle watchtowers, tear gas canisters embedded in dining rooms, metal detectors, and gun-toting officers in overhead gun galleries guaranteed that security was always total. Even minimal privileges, conversing at meals, getting visitors, or holding a work assignment, had to be earned. Life at Alcatraz was not merely a life of incarceration but one of psychological stamina. Though the penitentiary had capacity for 312 men, it never came close to being full. The cells were reserved for the most notorious criminals, individuals like Al Capone and George "Machine Gun" Kelly. Any who were too unruly were relegated to D Block, where the Hole sat, a line of isolation cells notorious for their harsh conditions. No pretense of rehabilitation existed at Alcatraz. Pure control, a fortress used to break rebellion, that crushed defiance. During its 29 years of existence, technological improvements such as electrified fences, sophisticated locking mechanisms, and strengthened security measures tightened its grip. The reign of the Rock came to an end on March 21, 1963. Years of corrosion from saltwater had rendered its buildings weakened, and the cost of upkeep exceeded its goal. Yet Alcatraz did not perish. Now, under the National Park Service, it stands as a museum that welcomes over 1 million tourists annually. Tourists walk its restored corridors, retracing the line of survival and punishment. The walls are still intact, but the legend has become even more powerful. And it all revolves around one night that reshaped everything. Alcatraz was not just a prison, it was a concept. It was the ultimate representation of American imprisonment, the last destination for men who had evaded every other institution. It sat on an island battered by storms, surrounded by icy, swift-moving currents, which made it appear inviolate. To fly from Alcatraz wasn't only unlikely, it was unimaginable. The myth was backed by cold statistics. Within 29 years, there were 14 attempts to escape. Each one of them failed, men were shot, caught up again, or presumed drowned in the hostile waters. None were ever known to have succeeded. The bay itself was the final, impenetrable barrier, a moat that devoured hope whole. To try and escape was, for most, to sign your own death warrant. This myth of the inescapable Rock was crucial. It wasn't merely a matter of security, it was psychological. Guards, officials, and the public alike believed in it. So long as the illusion existed, Alcatraz was impregnable. But in June 1962, that myth was broken. Between 10:30 and 11 p.m., 3 men slipped out of their cells and disappeared, Frank Morris, and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. The escape stunned the nation. Suddenly, the fortress was no longer invincible. If even one man had truly made it off the island, the Rock's authority had crumbled. The aftermath was not just about security, it was psychological. The prison's aura of absolute control cracked, and in its place grew something more enduring, mystery. Unlike past escapes, this one left no conclusion. No bodies were recovered, no closure was given. That vacuum of certainty became fertile ground for speculation, fascination, and legend. More than half a century later, the 1962 escape isn't just an event, it is the turning point in the mythology of Alcatraz. Whether the men drowned in the bay or vanished into freedom, their disappearance proved something far greater, even the Rock could break. At the center of the scheme was Frank Lee Morris, a man who had lived life evading authority. Orphaned at the age of 11, convicted by 13, Morris hardened by institutions from his youth. A record of armed robbery, possession of narcotics, and most famously, repeated escape successes. Having escaped from Louisiana State Penitentiary, he was deported to Alcatraz in 1960, exactly the kind of prisoner the Rock was designed to keep locked up. But Morris was no typical prisoner. Highly intelligent, clever, and strategic, he set out at once to search for vulnerabilities. Destiny put him next to 2 men he knew from other prisons, John and Clarence Anglin, and Allen West. Their adjoining cells enabled the 3 to whisper to each other at night, their conversations slowly weaving together into one of the most sophisticated prison escape schemes in American history. Morris became the natural leader. With spoons, saw blades, and even a crudely fashioned drill from a vacuum motor, the men excavated salt-rusted concrete under their cell vents. In order to conceal the holes, Morris made papier-mâché grills colored to blend with the originals. While playing his accordion during music hour, he covered the noise of drilling with the wheezing melody. The ingenuity was not confined to the cells. From more than 50 raincoats, they patched together a 6 by 14-foot raft and life jackets, closing them with hot steam pipes. A concertina was converted into an air pump. Each aspect was designed with attention to detail. This was no hope-fueled gamble, it was a finely calculated assault on the very myth of Alcatraz. Morris and the Anglin brothers disappeared into the night of June 11, 1962. West was left behind when he did not complete widening his vent in time. The official report concluded that the 3 drowned, their bodies never found. But rumors persisted. In 2013, a letter appeared purporting to be from one of the Anglins, stating that they had lived in seclusion for decades. Regardless of whether or not they died in the bay or strolled free into history, one fact remains undeniable: theirs was the greatest escape in Alcatraz history. And it proved that even the Rock could, in fact, crack. John William and Clarence Anglin were raised together. They were 2 of 13 siblings born to a poor farm family in rural Georgia. It was a rough life, and the parents later relocated the family to Florida for better jobs. There, the siblings earned a reputation for being together regardless of what, always side by side, working in the fields, swimming in the lakes, or subsequently, committing crimes. As young men, the Anglins turned to robbery, favoring banks. Unlike violent outlaws, they carried out their heists with calm precision, often without harming anyone. But their luck didn't last. Arrests followed, and their repeated attempts to escape prison made them notorious. Authorities soon decided they needed a place where escape was impossible: Alcatraz. In the notorious island prison, the brothers were joined by Frank Morris, another escape artist they had initially met in the Atlanta penitentiary. The 3 immediately became friends. Morris possessed the brains, the Anglins had the hands-on expertise, and the 2 of them started scheming what would turn out to be history's greatest prison escape. The Anglin brothers' handiwork came in handy. They assisted in constructing a raft and life jackets from over 50 pilfered raincoats, sewing and heat-sealing them to endure the icy waters of San Francisco Bay. They also assisted in constructing the decoys that would deceive the guards: soap, toilet paper, and actual human hair-made dummy heads. On June 11, 1962, late evening, John and Clarence Anglin escaped from their cells accompanied by Frank Morris, leaving behind the decoys on their pillows. The three men had disappeared into the darkness by the time the guards realized what was happening. The dummy heads were the easiest and yet most ingenious aspect of the scheme. From a combination of soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, and prison wall dust scraped off, men created convincing human faces. They colored them with prison art materials and glued on real hair pilfered from the barbershop carefully. Put on the pillows, blankets drawn up over them, the heads resembled sleeping prisoners. In the dim illumination of the cell block, there was no reason guards should suspect otherwise. As they made their bed checks that evening, they looked in, saw what appeared to be sleeping inmates, and proceeded on. This ruse purchased the fugitives the valuable hours they required. It was evidence that occasionally the most elementary deceptions can lead to outwitting the most rigorous system. It was hardest to escape from the cells. For months, the men worked on chiseling the deteriorated concrete that surrounded the air vents at the rear of their cells. They worked with stolen cafeteria spoons, shattered saw blades, and even a homemade drill constructed from a vacuum motor. The work was painstaking, but they concealed their progress with painted cardboard panels that they blended into the walls. From a distance, the holes were unseen. To conceal the sound, Frank Morris played his accordion at recreation time, covering the scraping and drilling. When finally large enough, the men crawled through a concealed utility tunnel behind the cells. From there, they ascended pipes to the rooftop of the prison. Creeping quietly, they moved across the rooftop, descended a big kitchen vent pipe, and slipped by two fences before arriving at the black shore below. Each step was fraught with danger. One misstep, one noise, or one inquiring guard might have sealed their fate. But the guys retained their cool, and by nightfall had completed the last phase of their scheme. Without a raft, the breakout would be suicide. The sea around Alcatraz was treacherous, freezing cold, turbulent, and varying currents. But the Anglin brothers and Morris were ready. They had sewn together over 50 raincoats, fusing the seams with heat from steam pipes in order to render the material waterproof. The outcome was a 6 by 14-foot raft, big enough for all three men. They created a number of life vests as well and fashioned paddles out of spare wood. Even the prison concertina was used as an air pump to fill the ship. They took the deflated raft ashore on the evening of June 11, 1962. Under cover of night, they inflated it and paddled away from the northeast tip of the island toward Angel Island about 2 miles out. What became of them is the biggest Alcatraz mystery. There were only fragments from search efforts the next few days, a paddle, some scraps of raincoat,